試してみるか。貴様の炎と俺の炎、どちらが強いか。譲れないもの一つ、たった一つ、背負いを増した向かい風の中を。
And here it finally is. Today I will be analyzing and talking about Hitman Reborn's protagonist, Tsunayoshi Sawada, with how much he developed from the start to finish, how the journey he faced in the story arcs influenced his growth throughout the course of the series, and mostly with his realistic aspect as a character. Now, there was an older video about the same topic back in 2020, which was made by yours truly. However, that video, as much as well received as it was, to me, it wasn't that great. It didn't really feel like I gave that video enough justice. All I said was that Tsuna was quote-unquote realistic character without elaborating or giving other examples as such. All of my points back then wasn't the strongest. However, that just gets to show me that in the near future, we can always do better, or at least try to improve over time, or little by little. Now, as someone who just reread the manga, rewatched the anime several times, I think I'm good to go for another round of analysis. Hopefully the last time. Before we begin, let me set an important disclaimer that this will contain huge amount of spoilers since, like I said, I will be covering the entire story arcs from the daily life arc all the way to the Curse of the Rainbow arc. If you've yet to catch on with the series and you do mind spoilers, I highly recommend you finish the series entirely. As for those who finished the whole series or those who don't mind spoilers, I guess you're free to stick around. Now, Tsuna isn't particularly a confusing protagonist, rather he's the opposite. He shows a lot of emotions, which to me it works well with Hitman Reborn's advantage. After all, we are not talking about someone who's labeled a Mary Sue or a typical bland protagonist. He has this charm or charisma that some people may like, and some that don't. But I will be fair and say that Tsuna is not necessarily the most disliked anime character, at least for the most part. He isn't as hated as other far worse protagonists that you would encounter people trash talk on the internet. No, Tsuna does have a mixed rep throughout the community so far, but I want to go through the reasons on why not only is he a very unique character, but mostly how his approach and his aspect development works very well with the series' advantage. So, with that being said, let's dive in. From the beginning of the series, this is when the main character is introduced, Tsunayoshi Sawada. We know that he is not good in studies, he does not have any real friends, and he's pretty much an average loser who constantly gets bullied because he doesn't stand out to his class. He lacks self-confidence, he's very cowardly, he's wrong about everything, he likes a girl that is way above him in every way, and he's basically in everyone's shit list. Based on the opinions that I have gathered, Tsuna is a very realistic type of character. He feels more human due to his realistic thinking like most common individuals in the real world, which makes him easy to connect with. Not to mention that he is one of the few shonen protagonists that lives in a society that is much like our own. A world with no shinobis, no pirates, no flying cars, or any of that sort. He seems to deal with common problems that most of us can identify with. This includes failing in his studies, getting bullied, and his distaste of violence, which makes him easy to relate to say the least. And even though he's proven to be a total chicken at times, it's a good way to show how some teenagers can lack self-confidence. Now, for a quote-unquote underrated protagonist, he seems to be well received by the community's opinions that I have gathered so far. Surely, he doesn't seem to have much of a bad rep in the anime community compared to other anime and manga characters with the worst rep out there, which to be fair, it's true. So, why exactly did I name him that? An underrated protagonist? I think it's because even though the majority of people understand that he is realistic, some of his faults are still recognized by other people. They seem to think that he doesn't remotely develop as much as a protagonist as the series goes on. Or some of them might think that he is way too bland or just another typical cliche protagonist. Statements that I don't necessarily agree with. Now look, Every character has their strengths and weaknesses, no denying that. This goes to even the most beloved or the most recognizable characters out there. And even though Tsuna has somewhat a decent rep overall, there are still misconceptions surrounding his character, although not as much as other anime characters, but don't worry, we're gonna rip into it. So, in this first stage, a home tutor was said to be introduced to Tsuna by his mother. It's meant to raise their children and help them through their background. And as we know, Tsuna's background is literally him being an underdog. He ended up telling his own mother that not only he doesn't need a tutor, but he said that word for word, he is not good at anything he does anyways. He seemed to be content with that fact, but it's apparent that he has so many regrets and an utter lack of confidence. When Reborn shoots him with the dying will bullet and he confesses to Kyoko, he gets into a hilarious overdramatic fight with the person that bullies him the most. When winning that fight, thanks to his dying will mode and not letting him have that regret, he gains a friend for the first time, Kyoko, the same girl he happened to have a crush on. Now, Tsuna has a lot of regrets throughout his life, and this is why the first arc of the series is very important, because this story arc wasn't only for getting to know the characters, but it was also meant to build his character, allowing him to fulfill most of his regrets, which usually ending up Tsuna getting shot by the bullet, albeit in a humorous way, whenever Reborn senses fear in him. Most of his regrets includes not saving Kokudera from getting blown to bits and pieces by his own dynamite, not saving Haru from drowning, not saving Kyoko from getting food poisoned by Bianchi, and not saving Yamamoto from, get this, jumping off a roof. No, really, he actually tries jumping off a roof, which is only exclusive to the manga chapter, however. All of these were crucial developments for Tsuna and his friends. In a sense, the daily life arc works as a catalyst in Tsuna's character in order for him to get stronger, not just physically but mentally as well, by gaining him friends one by one in order to find that confidence with the help of Reborn. It gives us a complete knowledge that deep inside Tsuna lies a strong resolve despite him shying away on the outside. Also, just thought I'd like to point out, in the anime, when Reborn shoots Tsuna, the bullet basically acts like magic, where it suddenly just disappears and enters Tsuna's head. But in the manga, however, it's blood. Yeah, another weird censorship from Studio Artline, but to be fair, Japanese anime in 2006 tend to have that similar case as well, I think. But that just serves as a suggestion that yes, Tsuna has been dying throughout the whole show, and the only reason why he comes back to life was because it shows the kid actually has a lot of things to do in his life before he dies. With that said, there are some people that made up comments about how the first arc of Tsuna had little to no development, and they might even argue that he is only capable of doing said things he regrets as soon as he is shot by the bullet. But that is incorrect, as he seems to have development as early in Chapter 2 even without getting shot. In Chapter 2, for example, during the volleyball match, Tsuna learns to try, just genuinely try. This is something he decided for himself and not Reborn. He sees that his teammates were trying so hard to win despite injuries. The wimp from Chapter 1 doesn't run away here and decides to give a genuine effort in an attempt to not let his teammates down and have that regret. We learn that Tsuna wants to willingly improve himself. He is aware of his background as a true loser, and he wants to take the opportunity to change that all by himself, rather than running away from responsibilities. As Reborn even said himself in the first episode of the anime, during the time Tsuna was challenged by his biggest bully. If you keep running away, you'll be running away for the rest of your life. This is a flaw in Tsuna's character in the first chapter. He doesn't know how to deal with responsibility and deal with stressful situations. He has that regret, but he can't take well in dealing with them and decides to run away from it. But we can clearly see here that he eventually learned that. And honestly, even if we count the times he entered Dying Will mode, this is not some kind of alter ego Yu-Gi-Oh transformation that he has, where it has two souls controlling over one body. Him in Dying Will mode, or any form he's in, is technically still him. It's not being controlled by a second soul or anything like that. This is him, but with his personality becoming wild and is given Toon Force powers, with the only thing in mind for him was to fulfill that desire he wants to do before he dies. It's a special weapon created by the Vangala family, Once it shot a person, they die. However, if they feel regret before or when they were shot upon impact, they basically become reborn with the flame in their head and will do anything to fulfill the things that they regret not doing before they die. In theory, it's not exactly clear or even visually shown on what exactly would happen if the person gets shot without being reborn, but given that it needs a regret in order to be reborn and achieve the very thing you wanted to do before you die, it probably means the opposite. If a person dies while being shot by this bullet without coming back to life reborn, they don't mind the very thing they want to do being easily taken away from them and would die as a result. But it's not like that with Tsuna at all. Being in this form for him makes his entire body feels like it's at its breaking point. However, being in this form, that's what he's risking his life on. Hence, it's his dying will. Tsuna has been shot by the same bullet throughout the whole course of the daily life arc, coming back to life constantly while doing the things he so desires, unwilling to have that regret of not doing it. It seems to follow this theme a lot about moving past regret, making us question why such a loser kid happens to live a life full of regrets. His tutor, Reborn, decided not only to help him with the study lessons, but also decided to help him with the way of life and fulfill his regrets by shooting him. We've seen this when Reborn encourages Tsuna not to run away when someone picks a fight with him. Reborn also helps him gain new friends and making him stronger to find a resolve of his own. The last time we ever saw Tsuna entering Dying Will mode was at the end of the second season during the battle he had with the fake Mukuro Rokudo, who was revealed to be Lancia. Update. This form actually also appears in certain arcs as well, but either way, that aside, move on. In the Kokuyo Gang arc, Tsuna is confronted with deceptive illusions and false perceptions. He must see through his enemies who deceive not only others, but themselves. Lancia, despite knowing he was manipulated, believes himself to be a bad person because of his previous actions. He had to believe that lie to endure the guilt of what he did. But Tsuna sees right through him, and that affirmation from the outside allows him to overcome the lie and Mukuro's influence. He said that when Lancia hit him with the finishing blow, he was able to see that he closed his eyes in mere seconds right before hitting him. He was able to sense the guilt in his heart that conflicts within him, which means Lancia never had a desire to kill Tsuna and his friends in the first place. At this point, we know that Tsuna is fully capable of understanding the perspective of the people he fights against. He has that trait due to the bonding he has with his friends he met. Good qualities like trust, appreciation, etc. Despite being only a normal boy with no mafia background whatsoever, other than the fact that the first Tuvanga boss is his ancestor. Eventually, Lancia and the real Mukuro Rokudo, whom is the first antagonist of the first arc, had a history together, with Mukuro possessing him to kill his own old comrades. He took everything from him and made him a slave, made him his shadow, and when Lancia was silenced by the poison needles by one of the Kokuyo members, it finally gave Tsuna a strong conviction to confront Mukuro on his own, obviously with the friends he made along the way. His fight with Mukuro is where all his development in the first arc ties together. It mirrors to how he genuinely wanted to try to make his teammates win in the volleyball match. He wasn't only upset just because his friends were being assassinated one by one, which was a part of Mukuro's plan by the way. It was also the fact of what Mukuro has done to Lancia's comrades, murdering them. It's basically this one instance where we see Tsuna's resolve starts to shine. Not as a leader, but someone who is genuinely kind-hearted and is not afraid to do the right thing. To the point that his self-doubt took the better of him again, once more, because he thinks he can't save them. But even so, when Reborn told him to shout out his feelings, Tsuna really wanted to beat Mukuro. He didn't actually want to run away. This is another significant development from Tsuna. He doesn't want to accept the fact that he is useless to his friends. He is overshadowed by negativity in his head. But the thing is, he actually desires to fight back. He wanted to beat Mukuro for everything he's done. Now, when shot by the Rebuke bullet, it is now Tsuna who must confront a lie he tells himself as well. He sees that his friends and family criticizing him. He also sees them talking about how he's grown and what they see in him and that he doesn't see in himself. He's not the useless, hopeless loser he believed himself to be at the start, and the people who loved him might have their critiques on him, but they never believed that about him. Lancia himself even told Tsuna to protect his friends because he does not want the same tragedy to occur to other people again. including Tsuna. And in overcoming that lie he's told himself, he awakens to an inner strength he's always had, the ability to unlock his hidden awareness, combined with his resolve to fight back, in turn manifest to the Hyper Dying Will mode, the upgrade version of the Dying Will mode. Mukuro Rukudo wanted revenge for being experimented on as a child by the Mafia and harbors a deep hatred for them, which is why he possessed Lancia to kill his comrades. He had several plans on his sleeve. For example, he wants to possess Tsuna as a part of his revenge plan, since he was aware that Tsuna is training to become the 10th generation boss of the Vangala family, the strongest Mafia family around. However, with Tsuna defeating him, it taught Mukuro some sense of humility, and that not everyone in the Mafia is terrible. Tsuna was able to change Mukuro's ways, which what made Mukuro very interested in him in the first place, because he doesn't exhibit the traditional aspects of a Mafia boss, violent, arrogant, etc. While he was defeated, Tsuna ended up sparing his life after all the sins Mukuro had committed, to Lancia, his friends, and to all the people he murdered. Knowing full well of his actions, Tsuna just refused to kill him because he knew that if he does kill him, he won't be any better than Mukuro. Mukuro became so fascinated to Tsuna that later on, he even joined in as a mist guardian to Tsuna's squad in the Vangala family by using Chrome as a vessel. The Kokuyo gang arc in a sense confronts Tsuna and the reader with the fact that the Mafia views the greatest evil not as harming the innocent, but as disloyalty to the organization. Mukuro is haunted not because of his cruelty, but because he killed his fellow mafioso, people for whom cruelty is almost the entirety of their job descriptions. To me, Tsuna is very different from any shonen protagonist. The reason being is that usually the main characters in shonen share a similar aspect to one another. Either they are characters that are delinquent noble punks that usually gets into fights like Yusuke from Yu Yu Hakusho, Rin Kumura from Blue Exorcist, and Jotaro Kujo from JoJo Bizarre Adventure, or the types of characters that sets up a grand position that they're determined to reach, such as Naruto Uzumaki, who wants to become Hokage in the Naruto series, Luffy, who wants to become the Pirate King in One Piece, then there's Izuku Midoriya, who wants to become the #1 hero in My Hero Academia, and Asta, who wants to become the Wizard King in Black Clover, stuff like that. Now what makes Tsuna different is that he does not necessarily share the same specific desire to become the impossible, like a grand position goals in life, nor is he the kind of delinquent protagonist that you would expect for someone who is an underdog. Tsuna is just a normal teenage boy living in a world that is much like our own, and he almost never wants to do anything with the Mafia business in the first place. There's even times he is actively avoiding any unnecessary conflict while still trying to live a normal life. Tsuna is forced to an uncertain destiny to fight against crazy people that had lost their ways. His desire is that he also does not want any of his friends that he was able to connect with to be involved with the Mafia or any conflict that takes place by protecting them. And trust me, Tsuna knows the risk all too well. He even blamed himself after Kokudera, his loyal friend, getting injured just to save him. I might even say that in a sense, he's the straight man to the comedic relief moments in which he basically reacts or responds to things realistically when faced with a bizarre situation. For example, how he's able to see through Reborn's obvious disguises, but nobody else does. How he questioned the fact that going in Dying Will mode makes him run around with nothing but his boxers like a total jackass. And while admittedly he isn't necessarily proven to be leagues above other protagonists in terms of a character that starts off being intelligent in the story, like say Edward Elric from Fullmetal Alchemist or Maka Albarn from Soul Eater. And while he does get smarter the more the story goes on, like being a skilled fighter in hyper mode, or eventually showing us that he did improve his grades little by little, the lesson that Reborn taught Tsuna is not only to prevent him from self-doubt, but also to teach him to keep his friends together as a family, protecting them and what it means to risk his life. Which sort of reminds me of another fellow shonen protagonist that more or less gets the same critique, introducing Ichigo from Bleach. Both are very similar in some aspects, in my opinion. From what they share in common is that while both characters don't really aim for something grand, they do in fact have a strong desire of protecting the people they held dear. They live in a normal world, both have a thinking of a common individual, both are very reasonable characters and are heavily defined by that trait, and both at certain times do their best to understand their enemies. Except, however, there is something that sort of sets them apart. Ichigo is not afraid to fight. He has a sense of agency and is more than willing to fight Hollows or anyone who intends to harm his friends and family. When Rukia, for instance, gave her powers to Ichigo, it gave him a reason to protect and will use his powers for the greater good. While on the other hand, Tsuna is more of a pacifist. While he is also determined to protect his friends, He prefers not to resort in violence in every chance he can get. He's grown to become someone who is more concerned of not killing his enemies rather than his own safety. This kind of characteristic actually carried on in the later arcs. He's not really the kind of person, or dare I say, mafia leader that chooses to kill or anything. And even then, he is still relatively new to the mafia world. He's only 14 after all. He didn't even kill the guy who possessed his own friends, for crying out loud. He only wanted to defeat him while still keeping his hands clean, preventing himself from taking another life. A characteristic that is completely different from most of Tsuna's enemies. Tsuna even ends up getting scared of his own powers, and how they were even manifested in the first place, to the point that he wasn't even able to control it completely until the later arcs. Despite that, however, his power and resolve is a part of him now, and he has to learn to contend with that fact. While he still refuses to accept his role as a mafia boss and resort to violence, his strong will is to protect his friends and family with his powers, and that helped him mature in a way and gave him a reason to fight, while also following his no-kill rule. I like to point out that every time Tsuna enters Hyper Dying Will mode, he acts as if he was going to die. He always fights with the intention of protecting his dear ones. Deep down, it's pretty clear that he's noble and is willing to do anything in order to fight back. It's a little similar to the previous Dying Will mode. However, instead of having their external limiters removed, it's actually the user's internal limiters that are removed, therefore releasing the user's hidden awareness. Other than keeping their clothes intact, the user is able to fight calmly instead of using all of their Dying Will at once, with their pupils becoming a darker color and their irises becoming a lighter version of the original color of their eyes. Now, let me talk about one of my favorite fights from Tsuna in the entire series so far, aside from Tsuna vs Enma and Tsuna vs Byakuran, and that is Tsuna vs Zanzus. We talked about Mukuro earlier. We learned that Mukuro is a character that has a deep hate to not only the Vongole family, but to all the mafia in general, due to his painful history of being experimented on. Zanzus is the complete opposite to this, however. In fact, I might even say he's also very different from Tsuna as well, which allow me to elaborate. Zanzus is someone that has the highest order of mafia experience, aside from maybe Reborn. He is absolutely leagues above Tsuna in any way you can imagine when it comes to mafia experience. He's far more ruthless, he is violent, and unlike Mukuro, who hates the mafia, Zanzus is someone that is dedicated to earn his right to become the Vongole boss, as well as by taking the title and prove that he is destined to be one. He would even harm his own comrades for losing the fight and failing to earn their rights to the ring battles. He even allowed his most loyal men, Super Beast Squalo, to die or be wounded in front of him for not being able to serve him well. On the right hand, Tsuna would rather see his friends come out in one piece rather than a simple ring. Like that one speech he said to Kokudera during his battle with Bell. He asks him, "Why the hell do you think we're fighting? Because we're still gonna have snowball fight and watch fireworks together. That's why we're fighting. That's why we're getting stronger." Tsuna continues on by saying that he still wants to laugh with everyone and spend time with them because he just started to cherish them, but if he sees any of them die, then it's useless. Tsuna did not want the violence of his friends to occur again, like what happened to them in the previous arcs, wounded, injuries, which is why he valued them from the very beginning they met. Being a leader in the context of Hitman Reborn's protagonist isn't someone who leads his people any way they want, but it is someone who is concerned with the well-being of others and keeping them together. The Varia arc represents the vision of what might be considered the ideal Mafia Don, a cruel, hateful killer of a man in Zanzus, and then goes out of his way to show that even this person is a victim of the Mafia's arbitrary cautiousness. It never even mattered how loyal Zanzus was to begin with. The Vongole would always pick as an heir to someone with a pedigree over someone who gave their whole life to the world of the Mafia. You see, Zanzus is this power-hungry being that wants nothing more than to control the Mafia world and is willing to kill literally anyone who gets in his way in the process, even if it's someone who's clearly underneath him, someone who's young, someone who clearly only fought like less than 10 people. Unlike Tsuna, who, while he may not be as dedicated his role to be Vongole Decimo, he's more of a forgiving leader in the group. He spends most of his time with his friends bonding and training for the next battle. The reason why this is so important is because Zanzus is everything that Tsuna is against and doesn't want to be, which is why he faces him, and it creates this conflict between them that matters. Tsuna wants to protect the people he was able to come to terms with, and knowing that if Zanzus becomes the one with the power, his friends, family, and anyone who are close to Tsuna who are involved with the Mafia are in grave danger. Especially after what he did to Timoteo, the 9th boss before him, and that is what gave Tsuna that extra push to fight him back. as well by not letting him earn the title to be the 10th boss and to be the one with the power. This is also one of the reasons why Zanzi's became one of my favorite anti-hero characters, or just one of my favorite characters in the series overall. Amano wrote him to be ruthless, violent, menacing, and overall a dangerous boss. Things that Tsuna is not and doesn't want to be. And so it creates this conflict and a reasoning for Tsuna deciding to fight him as a part of his resolve. Two different ideals between two vastly different characters of what it means to be a true leader clashes in this whole arc, which is why it is the main climax. After the battle, Tsuna states that the Sky Ring had rejected Xanthus, and Squalo, who was on a wheelchair, tells the story of the Cradle affair. It was revealed that Xanthus was an adopted son to the 9th boss of the Vongala. His relationship with the 9th boss is strained. He bears a grudge against him for lying to him about his origin. Despite this, however, the fight still mattered because we get to see more of Tsuna as a responsible person. His ambition to fight Xanthus grew and grew, and that's what made him think of the consequences of losing the fights. While he did chicken out at some point, but like I've said before, any middle schooler thrown into a situation like Tsuna would crack from pressure and lose themselves upon the horrors of the mafia world, in my opinion. He's not the bravest kid, and that's what makes him relatable. But through Tsuna's eyes, his experience of fighting Mukuro, his feelings of wanting to beat him, Reborn training him, the bonding of his friends and keeping them at bay, he also gained his own resolve to fight Xanthus as well in a more or less similar manner. And yet, even in that fight, similarly to how he spared Mukuro, he also refused to kill Xanthus as well. Tsuna's the kind of character that wants to see the good side of people. He doesn't want to kill them and not think for a second about the life he took. His determined sheer resolve is to protect. This is another example of Tsuna following his no-kill rule. Although this may have been an exception in the future arc with the battle he had with Byakuran, but I will elaborate on that soon. In my opinion, I don't see how Tsuna's character resets in every arc. Yeah, don't get me wrong, he does stick to his wimpy self in some moments, and he still refuses to be a boss, but that doesn't mean he's afraid to do what's right now. This proves that the boy is still growing and learning, which then brings us to the future arc. There are times where Tsuna doesn't hesitate to help others like the way he actively did in the previous experience. He did rather too quickly, in fact. We even get to see more of Tsuna's moments in this arc, and that was in chapter 158. It was both in the anime and the manga. It was during his fight with the 10-year-later Hibari, where Hibari traps him inside his Vongala box and he gets to face the previous Vongala bosses before him. The important thing here to note is that the Vongala family, the organization that Tsuna was trained to be the next boss, once started off as a group of vigilantes suggested by Kosato Simon when Vongala Primo set himself as the first boss many light years ago. However, the more generations pass, their ways eventually changed to violence and crime. The reason why I have to point this out was because in this scene in particular, Tsuna was given an opportunity to inherit the Vongala's past sins, like murder and violence, which represents the Vongala's now greatest history of power before him. The previous boss has stated to him that you should not turn away. This is the destiny of the successor of the Vongala. This is the purpose of the life you were given. Tsuna then began to hear the painful screams of the innocents, the people that were killed or tortured by the hands of the past Vongala's boss's perspective. He was shown how the Vongala's powers are exactly that. They said, this is the price we must pay for the power we wish for. If it is great power you want, you must also have the resolution to inherit our great history. And then there is, I'd like to say, Tsuna's all-time greatest moment.
みんなを守るためなら何だってできるって思ってた。でもこんな力なら俺はいらない。
なんだと。
こんな間違いを引き継がせるなら俺がボンゴレをぶっ壊してやる。
Tsuna literally just said he would rather destroy the Vongala. Not the friends who became his guardians, but the Vongala family itself. He opposed them rather than accepting their power to inherit their past crimes. I know I keep saying this all the time, but it brings truth to this, because as I've stated before, Tsuna has the strongest and the most determined will of protecting his friends. From the first arc all the way here, we see him growing. It's telling us that resolve is also a part of growth. It's the carrying characteristics of a leader or finding self-worth, someone who controls desire. His character as a whole is to overcome his stubborn nature, so everything he did that went against what he showed on the outside such as his dislike to the mafia, he would try to hide it. Case in point being in this scene, where he just threatened to destroy the Vongola. Later on, however, he never brought that up again. It was a peek at what he actually was. Granted, he refused to accept the sins of the Vongola, the cruel power that they contained, but at the same time, this was something he never brought up once again. A character that had no need to be in the mafia makes a claim that would make him seem like a strong presence, to threaten the biggest family on the planet. In the future arc, he had a clear determination to save the future. Right after the future arc, he went out of his way to hide his ring. It's as if his character reset, but in reality, this was his conflict. He tries to cover it up with the facade of, I hate the mafia. Now, let me remind you about the power systems of Hitman Reborn, the Dying Will Flames. While most other anime power systems usually rely on magic, mana, or spiritual energy, Dying Will Flames is a power system of the mafia world that runs specifically on a person's life force, a willpower in a sense. It exists in both the heroes and villains, tying together the classic shonen trope where both sides, heroes and villains, draw from the same exact source of power. Probably the best comparison to this power system would be the Nen from Hunter x Hunter and Ki from the Dragon Ball series. But having a Dying Will Flame isn't necessarily just for fighting other enemy mafias. It also categorizes a direct relationship with the strength of an individual's resolve, albeit good or evil. This makes the purity of a flame basically a reflection of the strength and size of a person's determination, while also sensing the emotions of its user, so the stronger the resolve or desire, the stronger the flame it becomes. It's more or less an invisible blood cycle that runs on the veins of a person's desire, which emits fire. That's why there are a variety of different types of Dying Will Flames in the series to begin with. They have their own characteristics, and they ignite when their life force is exposed. Zanza's, for example, has a unique relationship with his own Dying Will Flame, the Flames of Wrath, also known as the Flames of Rage, which is a combination of both the Sky Flames and the Storm Flames. Flames of Wrath is an extremely powerful and exceedingly a rare special type of flame in the Hitman Reborn universe. The only user thus far is Vongola Secondo and Zanza's. The most common characteristic of this flame is its extreme destructive power, which can literally reduce anything to ashes. The flame was only seen when Vongola Secondo was enraged, thus it earned the title Flames of Wrath to support this theory. Zanza's was able to manifest the Flames of Wrath in a very similar manner. The angrier he gets, the stronger his flame becomes, hence why Zanza's is the perfect user to this flame. Another character that is able to awaken the flames in a more or less similar way would most certainly be Hibari Kiyoya, as he was able to figure out that the Dying Will Flames to him is fueled by irritation instead of resolve, due to him thinking that both were the same thing, even though he doesn't wield the Flames of Wrath as he's the user of the Flames of Cloud. However, to the vast majority of the characters in the series, most of them awaken their flames through resolve alone. And as we saw from Tsuna gets stronger throughout the course of the series in its story arcs. It basically proves that his resolve for protecting others has gotten stronger since his previous fights from the very beginning till the end. There's even times when Tsuna's Sky Flames had improved in several ways as well. He demonstrates this through the bonding of his friends who became his loyal guardians, who fight side by side with him, the way he encourages trust to all the characters involved, his will of not inheriting the Vongola's past violence and from learning new techniques. He was even shown to be fully capable of upgrading his battle X gloves as well. The aspect of resolve in the future arc, in my opinion, might be the biggest step up in terms of development, including Tsuna. It brings home the idea that his friends' support allows him to keep on fighting. The X-Burner, by far one of Tsuna's most powerful attack, was literally created in this story arc because he was able to realize that, and all he needed to learn that was the conversation he had with Haru, his Vongola pet named Natsu, not to be confused with Natsu Dragon from Fairy Tail, but rather Natsu from Hitman Reborn, a being that acts as a powerful Vongola pet used for weaponry that contains within a box. This being reflects that of the personality of its user. If the user is scared, it's scared. If the user is determined, then it would be the same way. And it didn't take long enough until Kyoko, who taught Tsuna how to control it, and that is to stay at ease and not letting the worries or anxiety bother you in order to gain its trust. We even get to see more of Tsuna throughout his battles, where he once again does his best not to use lethal tactics on his enemies. The characters that Tsuna meets along the way were also affected by the bond and the kindness of Tsuna's character, like how he was able to befriend several characters who are supposed to be his enemy, like Spanner, who only wanted to see Tsuna's perfected ex-burner, and Shuichi. Vongole Primo, the first boss of the Vongole, also known as Gyotto, manages to see Tsuna as his true successor, even after his resolution of destroying the Vongole, if he were to inherit its past violence. He is responsible for creating the Vongole family as a group of vigilantes. He has helped him when he seemed to be in trouble, even as a hologram, such as his battle with Byakuran, where Gyotto appears to unlock the true power of the Vongole ring, something which he had not been done for 8 generations of the Vongole Guardians, as he believes that Tsuna will understand the true meaning of the rings and his will. Hayato Gokudera, Tsuna's most loyal right-hand man, in battle and in friendship. Gokudera once used to see Tsuna as nothing more than his boss and will only strictly serve him because it's the Vongole rules. Tsuna, however, never asked that from him at all. There's even times when Tsuna didn't want him to address him such. He only wanted to see him as a great friend or a classmate. He just wanted Gokudera to have a free will of his own, rather than just serving him all day. It took long enough for Gokudera to accept it, but before the fight with Byakuran, Gokudera states that after fighting alongside with him, he decided that he didn't want it to be the reckless right-hand man anymore. And this time, he will fight because he wants to laugh side by side with everyone, like the words that Tsuna told him in the Varia arc. Yamamoto also had good support for Tsuna's potential as well, especially after he saved him from jumping off the roof, and later joined as a Rain Guardian swordsman of the Vongole. Yamamoto accepts Tsuna as a boss and a friend, and is perfectly fine with following Tsuna's leadership even though he is so young. He is willing to sacrifice anything to save him and learn to cooperate with others. Ryohei was also grown to appreciate Tsuna. At first, he just wanted him to be in the boxing club because of his superior fighting skills. But later on in the series arcs, he understood the reality and the struggles to survive and to protect the people he cares about. He is very overprotective of Kyoko, his little sister. He, like Tsuna, didn't want her to be involved with the mafia or otherwise tell her. When the beans were eventually spilled, there were a couple of disagreements about it, but that didn't stop Ryohei and Tsuna from fighting to protect them and everyone involved. Mukuro has also grown a liking to Tsuna, despite them being enemies. It got to the point that Tsuna just eventually lost his hatred to him. Although Reborn often reminds him about the horrible things Mukuro has done, Tsuna remains concerned about Mukuro's well-being, even though he acknowledges all of the things he had done were terrible, not wanting something bad to happen to him. Mukuro, from someone who has a deep hate to the mafia, manages to lay a trust on Tsuna as a person, a trust that is more than enough to protect his subordinates, including Chrome. Hibari, one of the most, if not the most bloodthirsty character in the group, also manages to see Tsuna in a light way as well. He once saw Tsuna as weak, someone beneath him, someone he can punish, someone that is, in his own words, a herbivore. But little by little, even he started to show respect to him over time, like in the Future arc and Inheritance Ceremony arc. This connection can be proven when the 10-year later Hibari was introduced, and he was willingly able to fight alongside them. Now looking at the villains of the Future arc, the Millefiore Familia, along with its boss, Byakuran. Byakuran, the Future arc version of him that is a character that has a cheerful disposition around his subordinates, especially around Shuichi Ire, even though he knew of his betrayal. As the final battle arc begins, we learn that Byakuran doesn't actually care about his comrades. No remorse was given when they had died, despite being their savior who had helped each of them when they were at their lowest in life. To Byakuran, he hadn't done it out of care, but out of the fact that they had been useful to him and his plans. It's revealed that Byakuran's goal was to obtain the ultimate power, the Trenaset, by gathering the Vongole rings, Mare rings, and the Arcobolona Pacifiers together in one place. When Tsuna and his friends first came in the future, Byakuran had been researching them, as well as time travel, in order to get a hold of the Vongole rings, which had been destroyed in his time. Byakuran has the ability to communicate with every other version of himself that is in different parallel universe, giving him the knowledge and experience he had gained from countless worlds to become the ruler of each of them. Byakuran is someone that Tsuna cannot be reasoned with because his goals of taking over the world were absolute. There's even a moment when Byakuran pities his life, talking down to him. Tsuna responded by admitting the fact that the future world can be scary. It can be painful due to the difficult times, but even so, there are moments where he felt happy and joy. He learned that it's not just about what's good or bad anymore. Everything that happened to him when he met Reborn, when he trained with his friends, his battles with all the people he had faced, how he was able to protect others, were the most precious moments of his life. There were never a time where he came to the future in any way to him were pointless. The bitter moments, the harshness, the fun things, the people he had met along the way. He learned everything now. By proving Byakuran wrong, he stopped calling himself unlucky and later entered Hyper Dying Will mode with sheer will this time.
Willing to risk his life once more, he decided to defeat him. When Yuni and Gamma sacrificed themselves, having a moment when Tsuna couldn't protect Yuni and Gamma, and Byakuran failing to require her as a result, ruining his plans. We see that Byakuran insulted Yuni at that point, calling her nothing but a mere toy, someone that he can play around with, and that alone prompts Tsuna to enrage and have him kill Byakuran in that process. This arc was also one of the biggest survival risks story-wise we've seen in the longest time, which is even better when layered with Tsuna's philosophy. He doesn't fight until he's backed into a corner and then lashes out wildly and almost like he can't control it. He's got a history of not fighting until and unless he's got other lives on the line. It's a dangerous trait for his enemies, himself, and his friends. Byakuran's actions, however, were very clear and unredeemed. There's no doubt that he was pure evil, and that was what made Tsuna having the urge to kill him, even though Tsuna just said he won't forgive him. The future arc is nearly entirely about Tsuna and his friends trying to overcome the inevitability of the future they find themselves in. Byakuran has sealed off every other possibility for them, and it's only through his defeat that the kids can regain the chance to pick their own destiny. It also shows that Tsuna becoming Decimo might just be a complete dead end. Any good he may try to do with the power he's entrusted with could be easily swallowed up by the inherent cruelty within the system. When Byakuran was killed, so were the other versions of himself in the other parallel universe. All of them were annihilated except for one Byakuran in particular, the present version of him, which is more or less different than his future arc version. Still. With Yuni and Gamma's sacrifice, the Archibaldano in the future will all revive successfully. Tsuna had a guilt and awareness of not protecting Yuni and the injury of others, but the revived Archibalanos assured him by wanting him to have an uplook to it, to honor their sacrifice, but they will eventually make a return in the final arc. It took a while until all of the family time traveled 10 years in the present back to their current state. Finally, here we are at the two final arcs of the manga, the Inheritance Ceremony arc and the Curse of the Rainbow arc. The Inheritance Ceremony arc took place about a month right after the events of the final battle in the future arc. In this arc, we get to see more on Tsuna with his friends and the lore surrounding the Vongala family itself, along with getting to know the characters from the Simon family, mostly with Kosato Enma, who, according to Tsuna, reminded him of who he was.
Being the Vongala boss candidate in the inheritance ceremony, it means that they are officially recognized as the next boss for the family. Since the Vongala family is one of the biggest mafia families in the entire world, other mafia families from all over the world will be traveling to Japan to attend the ceremony and see the next boss for themselves. Tsuna was very bewildered by this news. He denies being a boss like usual, and we've seen this since the very beginning. He planned to have a job, raise money, and marry the girl he likes. Enma even suggested Tsuna to run away since they both plan to do so anyways. They both have a similar dislike to the Mafia, only to be interrupted by Reborn and assuring them not to run away, and then revealed that there's a certain Mafia group that will make an attempt to ruin the ceremony since they don't want the power to be in favor with the Vongala. Tsuna willingly entered hyper mode like he did in his battle with Byakuran and fought the assassin rather easily. Due to the assassination attempt, he more or less quickly gained trust from the Simon family, almost immediately, and gathered to protect him since they wanted to participate in the inheritance ceremony themselves. For the next few days, Reborn was able to observe the relationship with the Simon family and the Vongala, noting that Kokuyo and Ryohei finally working together, Kaworu regaining his confidence thanks to Yamamoto, and P being able to communicate with Gokudera. It wasn't until one of the allies to the Vongala were being attacked by the same group who were interfering with the inheritance ceremony. Tsuna then decides to follow Enma's suggestion in order to stop the violence and to run away. He was already sick of the Mafia business and was overwhelmed by how much violence that the Mafia has caused ever since then. He later told Reborn that he doesn't want to be the boss. Reborn responded to him that the only person that can convince him is none other than the ninth boss, Timoteo. When confronted Timoteo, he revealed that he knew from the very start that Tsuna did not like the idea to be the boss, not because Reborn told him, but because of Yuni, who told the ninth boss everything to what happened 10 years into the future during the fight with Tsuna and Byakuran as he was able to feel Yuni's flames. He understood that the candidate to become the boss of the Vongala for Tsuna wasn't truly meant to be the boss, and that was why the ninth boss revealed that he chose Tsuna because he's the only one that can return the whole Vongala family to its original state. The only one who can stop the violence and murder. As stated, the Vongala was once meant to protect the people, but their ways changed. Tsuna shared the same characteristics as with Gyoro 10 generations before him, and he wanted to destroy the current Vongala to what it is now.
Tsuna decides to talk to Enma, who later gained his understanding, but unbeknownst to him, Enma decided to test him by writing him a letter to see if he is trustworthy because of the code he remembers, Sin of the Vongla. He wanted to see if Tsuna is truly any different from other bosses, and so the letter stated that Enma was being threatened by a rival mafia gang and wanted Tsuna's help in confronting them at the abandoned factory. Tsuna did not show up because he had no idea about the letter in the first place, and so that was when Enma declared Tsuna to be his enemy. When Yamamoto was attacked by a mysterious mafia, Tsuna immediately decided to inform the Ninth and Reborn that he will take part in the inheritance ceremony, but with just one intention only: to find out who was responsible for Yamamoto's attack. It is later revealed that both the Simon and the Vongla families have historical ties with each other. Enma eventually reveals his intentions to Tsuna. He is now trying to destroy the Vongla family, including Tsuna, and control the mafia world for the pride of the Simon. Tsuna then decides to find Enma in the Simon Island hideout, rescue Chrome along with his friends. The ninth boss saw this from Tsuna and stated that Tsunayoshi said that he wanted to fight for the sake of his friends. That desire to protect the people he calls important is precisely the Vongla family that Primo created. He then goes on by saying, "When I first heard those words, I knew in my heart the wind that once again carries the Vongla towards righteousness is none other than Tsuna." After every battle that took place, Tsuna was taught about the concept of pride and how it is a very crucial word. Hibari and Ryohei actually were the ones that taught him that. He was taught that pride is something he cannot surrender or give away freely. Therefore, pride are his friends. Not just the ones who were with him, but the ones in the Simon that were actually good people, but were engulfed in rage and misunderstanding. The antagonist of this arc, Demon Spad, planned this entire thing by tricking Enma and his group by making them think that it was the Vongla that killed Enma's family, and that Gyoro betrayed his ancestor to make him think that the Vongla are nothing but cruel people. According to Demon Spad, he wanted the Vongla to be feared. To him, greed and power is what matters to the Vongla, and he wants to create war for this very reason. He then revealed that it was him who used the Simon family to fight the Vongla in the first place. He used them to overturn the mafia world from the very start. In a sense, he initiates the complete destruction for the mafia world, something that even Mukuro himself hated. Later on, he proceeded on with his plan by torturing Enma, by turning him into a killing machine, as soon as everybody in the island discovered that the Vongla Primo never actually betrayed Cosarto Simon. Tsuna then saved Enma from Demon Spad's control. They reconciled, became friends again, by Tsuna telling Enma that he is his pride. He had no idea what the word meant at first until Hibari and Ryohei mentioned it and taught him that. He even said that if pride is something he can't surrender, then he is confident to say that his prides are his friends and comrades. Not only restoring their friendship, this incident also deepened their trust towards each other, as Enma stated that he believes in Tsuna and he knew he would never betray him. Tsuna basically learned that his friends aren't just people he wants to protect. He learned that they are his pride and are the reasons why he has to be strong. Finally, with their battle of Demon Spad taking place, we've seen Tsuna in a new form, the Oath Flame. This is more of a combination between both Tsuna and Enma's powers, due to the bond that the both families shared. Tsuna and Enma were able to combine these powers together, allowing them to bring Demon Spad down. Enma was unable to fight due to his injuries, and so Tsuna ended up defeating him. And so, we get to learn more about him and his plans. Much similar to Tsuna and Enma, both Chrome and Suzuki were pushed in a very similar manner as well. When Chrome was introduced, she was heavily relying on Mukuro, the person who came to save her after a car crash accident. In the future arc, the Inheritance, and the later arc, Curse of the Rainbow, her connections to Mukuro were severed by making her someone who can stand on her own and being open to others, like when she independently saved Enma, for example. When Enma assured Tsuna to fire his double X burner towards him and Daemon while he is stuck, using his sacrifice for victory, Tsuna refused that idea due to him valuing the lives of his prides. It was Chrome who rushes in independently, creating a shield for her and Enma as Tsuna then fires his double X burner, and we could see how big it is. Suzuki's background was also enough of a push. As a young girl, Suzuki had to hold the group together, acting as a leader for Enma when he couldn't. She was the glue that kept her family group together and made to the strong person she is now by telling Tsuna to save Enma after she realized that Daemon manipulated them, as she is being held captive after being defeated by Hibari. With the defeat of Demon Spad, we learn more about his actions and history and the reason why he became very evil. It was all for the sake of the woman he loved, Alina. It's for her sake, since she loved the Vongla family more than anything. Alina was a gentle woman who showed concern for the weak people and wished to help them like Demon Spad at the time. Once she joined the Vongla with Primo and Daemon, she was grown to be proud of both Daemon and the Vongla for always protecting the weak people. and Alina's love for Daemon grew for his dedication and hard work. When the Vongala gained more and more power, Gyoro became worried that their familia would begin to fighting for self-interest. So, to prevent this from happening, Gyoro disbanded their military force. This action, however, created an opportunity for our rival mafia family to invade their territory and critically wound Alina, who died shortly afterwards, but not before telling Daemon to protect the weak with the Vongala, believing that Daemon would be able to do it. After Alina died, Daemon swore to make the Vongala strong in Alina's name, although he misunderstood her, assuming that she meant to eliminate the weak within the Vongala to make the family strong and maintain peace through fear. As this was revealed, Tsuna says, using power and money to control people through fear. You don't even take the feelings of the weak into consideration. Tsuna then assures Daemon that he understood Alina's feelings, even stated that she is grateful for him. He felt it with his Vongala's hyper-intuition. He told him that Alina wanted to thank him for trying his hardest to live his life without forgetting about who he truly is. Reborn convinces him to leave the Vongala to Tsuna, and Daemon finally acknowledges him and his guardians, entrusting the Vongala to them, and finally dies in peace. To conclude, the inheritance puts up a dark mirror to Tsuna's world by presenting a darker version of himself, defined not by the anarchic adventures and camaraderie, but by pain and shared suffering. Enma is Tsuna if his experiences were completely deprived of any notion of joy or hope. The Mafia doesn't actually care about their happiness or well-being. Tsuna finding rays of light in the position he's been put in were always a happy accident. With that, everyone was able to get together once more to form a beautiful friendship, which then starts the final arc of the series, the mystery of the cursed babies, a hint that was given after Tsuna defeats Daemon Spad. I think the most interesting thing about this story arc is the fact that not only do we get to see the turning point of the relationship between Tsuna and Reborn, but also how Tsuna more or less overcomes his dim view of his father, Imatsu Sawada, the father figure that abandoned him while he was still alive, the person that was absent throughout Tsuna's life, never helping him, protecting him. He left all that responsibility for both Reborn and Tsuna's own mother, Nana. It's a pretty clear evidence to suggest that Tsuna dislikes his father for a very numberable of reasons. The moment they fought for the first time shows this because Tsuna fought him due to personal matters, like abandoning him rather than fighting him because they were in separate teams. His father was on Team Colonel and he was on Team Reborn. The second encounter, however, when Reborn goes to his true form, he learned he has to accept his opponent, regardless of how much he is unpleased by them, and he needs to understand the means and the risk of fighting someone, even if it means that he will die, and he has to embrace it because that's the true meaning of having a strong resolve, hence dying will. So Tsuna just needed to acknowledge Imatsu and their resolution to fight until the destruction of his body, rather than fighting him for personal cheap pride causes. Tsuna admits he still refuses to acknowledge him. He won't forgive him for the times he abandoned him, but he was able to come to terms with that fact, that he is stronger than him, and that was a truth that he himself cannot deny. It took long enough until Tsuna manages to actually beat him. There were other moments in this arc that were memorable, like Tsuna and Mukuro making a truce together to fight down the Vindage, Kurome creating her own organs to survive through her need of Mukuro, the Hyper Trio, the fights with the Arcobaleno. Arguably one of the best moments, however, was the turn of the relationship between Tsuna and Reborn, after Tsuna discovered the truth about Reborn and all of the Arcobaleno's eventual death, which was confirmed by Bermuda. From the start of the series, Reborn always forces Tsuna, or at least lets him decide things on his own in all the previous arcs. There are also times when Reborn has to tell him what to do, whether he likes it or not. Not necessarily all the time, but in the grand scheme of things. Reborn was always there with him, watching him every time he battled, but throughout the course of the final arc of the series, Reborn this time actually put his foot down to Tsuna, telling him that he no longer needs to fight anymore. In fact, he even went so far as to tell Tsuna that this is a one fight that he cannot win. Bermuda, another fellow cursed Arcobaleno, mentions the fact that Kawahira, the one who's responsible for both the representative battle game and the Arcobaleno curse, saying that he had no intentions to free them from their curse and would likely create more cursed Arcobalenos. The whole game was a trap set up by him. It was then revealed that regardless of whether Reborn joins or not, he will die, which was why Reborn planned to side Bermuda at one point until Tsuna snapped. In the next chapter, Tsuna yelled at Reborn, telling him that he is a failure as a home tutor for that decision. This home tutor of his has turned the boy's life into what he calls a disaster, letting him through all the tough situations, befriending people he had no idea he would be friends with at all, and even forced him to have fun and fight crazy people that had lost their ways. And even then, he admitted he had fun. All of it made his life worth living despite this. And yet, he cannot allow Reborn to have a life that in the end was all unsatisfying. He is about to die and was even prepared for it because he literally says, "I never expected to die a decent death." This was a sentence that triggered Tsuna and what motivated him to lash out at him like that. So he then sets a stone and says that he will never let Reborn die. He even went so far as to gather everyone that Tsuna had a history with to fight with him, not only counting the Vongla family but even the past free enemies and their respective families, and the groups like the Varia, the Simon, and even the Melefior, and formed a strategy to take up Bermuda. Tsuna then learned another important lesson in this arc, and that is, the strength of dying will depends on the strength of their resolve. That was what made Tsuna grow for the best, able to handle his powers and become stronger. From a loser to someone who wants to try to change, from someone who is able to control his desire, from someone who learns the meaning of pride and what it means to protect his friends, and now to a leader that fights not because to prove he's superior in terms of power or his title for being a mafia boss, but because of the goal of valuing the lives of others. A form that is beyond any will and is now under the control of a young boy that is filled with hope. In the end, the babies were saved and were not sacrificed. They were all free from their curse, well, for the most part. But even then, Reborn was saved and even thanked Tsuna for that, for the first time, making their bond stronger than ever. Now looking at chapter 409, this chapter has some mixed responses among the Reborn community. There are some positives and negatives and usually ends up with someone making their own speculation. Personally, I think this chapter could have been done better on some certain levels. I don't think it's the best ending ever made due to being quite rushed, and I think we can all agree with that. While I'm completely neutral with this chapter overall, I will say that I do slightly lean towards positive. It gave a good impression that the ending isn't about power, mafia, or anything dramatic. Tsuna is naturally a leader and cares for his friends like he always was, changing him to what he used to be, an aspect that is more important than money, sports, academic abilities, grades, etc. He has friends, people that will like him despite his flaws. At the end of the manga, Tsuna became a man with a peaceful spirit, an independent mind, the ability to preserve, to have faith in others, and bring people together, the one with the strong will. Especially if you take the time to compare the final arc Tsuna with the first arc Tsuna and realize that not only how much he's changed, but how seemingly it all flowed. In chapter 1, as I've said in the beginning of this video, Tsuna always gets shot by the dying will bullet in order to fulfill most of his regrets, and on top of that, he has no friends. This is the theme of the daily life arc that followed, like I've mentioned earlier. And the whole point for him at the time was to have friends and gain confidence. Chapter 409 Tsuna not only has more friends, but he's no longer in the chains of regret anymore. He can finally live the life he always wanted, a peaceful life. We did see him go dying will mode once, but that was done for comedic purpose to show that while Tsuna has more or less changed, he still didn't confess to the girl he likes or save Haru and Lambo. But for all the things he has now, friends and some minimal courage, that is what mattered. Sure, while technically he did deny becoming a mafia boss in the end, like he does in the previous chapters, but that just so means he didn't want to rush his adulthood. Reborn helped Tsuna to grow as a person, but that didn't make his flaws go away, and that's okay. He wasn't trained to be smart or physically strong, but to be a good leader, with a group of friends that can protect him, something he achieved by the way, and someone who is not afraid to do what's right. People often assume or think that the character development means that someone is going to change completely from the start to finish, but that is a common misconception. Yes, having a character development does mean someone will change, but only in certain aspects, but the personality, or at least some few flaws, are supposed to be present. And as I've said, Chapter 1 Tsuna struggles with the social life, no friends, no courage, and lives a life full of regret, and the whole point for him in that version was to move on from past regret and gain friends. Chapter 409 Tsuna, his flaws and faults are still present. He's still recognized as no good Tsuna. He still sucks at sports. He doesn't get the highest grade, but the aspect that changed about him compared to his past self is that he has support from the people that accepted him, fought for him, and acknowledged him. He shows concern to even the people that he hated at the first, like his father. He's also no longer in the chains of regret anymore, and he has the resolve that is beyond any will. Some people in the community's interpretation with this chapter is that Tsuna is fine with becoming the new boss, as long as he does it the same way Primo does, and obviously it took him a growing pair to think of something insane like changing the way the biggest mafia in the world operates. Whether he does become the boss or not, we can objectively come together and say that he never denied meeting Reborn and fighting to protect his friends influenced him in the best of ways. Curse of the Rainbow arc as a whole can be seen as Tsuna finally being able to exert some levels of self-control over his own world. He throws the conventions and tradition of the mafia out the window and establishes his own rules, not for his organization's sake, but for the sake of the people he cares about. He doesn't entirely shake off the fate he's been saddled with by the end of the series, but the final note that he's left off with is that for all the suffering they put him through, the mafia has failed to fundamentally change who he is. For now, that is his victory over them. There's no telling what the future may hold from that point onward. His low self-esteem is going to make him think that he's still a loser, even when the series has given us plenty of moments to show he's not entirely the same guy as before. He's proven now he still has the power to control his own destiny, and in the end, that might very well make all the difference. Dying will means not to be lost, not to have regrets, and to believe in yourself is a phrase that best encapsulates Katekyo Hitman Reborn. This series is an emotional exploration of what it means to cling towards resolve and hope in the face of hardships, despair, and in the face of losing others who are close to you. The characters in the Shonen series are able to support each other through the difficulties they've been through, loving and accepting each other at their most vulnerable. Tsuna and Reborn were the first ones to connect them all in the first place, which is why they've all become a big family. The story of Hitman Reborn is about how a young boy moves past regrets, overcoming his self-confidence issues, how he stays true to himself, his morals, even towards the end, and having that strong resolve to keep his friends and family together, living happy and protected with the ability to fight even if it would kill him, to awaken the dying will that lies within you. Okay, so I hope this video taught you a thing or two about the series and its protagonist. I have nothing else to say at the very moment other than saying thank you if you reached this far. Whether you agree or disagree with my points is absolutely fine, just as long as this video was enjoyable to you and if you can accept my thoughts. With all that said, thank you for watching. Thank you.